Hello, I'm Dave McGuire, and welcome to the Let's Talk Tax podcast.
And today we're doing a special bonus episode where we get to meet the host, Dave McGuire. So Dave, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience in specialty tax?
Yeah, I've been working in specialty tax for well over 2 decades. I started in the late 90s. I'm a little bit different than most people that work in tax. I have an engineering background, but I've been working in tax for over a quarter century. I started with Ernst & Young, went to PwC, and then we started McGuire Sponsel. TJ and I sat around my kitchen table at the time when we actually first started thinking about McGuire Sponsel and what we wanted to do and how we wanted to start it.
And that was back in 2007, right? When you guys founded?
That was back in 2007, and a lot's changed since then. Obviously, the industry's changed. Since then, we've seen multiple legislative changes between the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. We've had the CARES Act that came out during COVID. Now we have the Inflation Reduction Act. And we've seen a lot of changes. We've seen changes in workforce demands, the desire for people to work from home. The industries are changing. We've seen that consolidation in the CPA industry. And we've tried to keep up with it and how things have changed over that time frame.
That's a good point. With so many complex tax concepts out there, what's your plan? What's your vision for making Let's Talk Tax accessible and engaging for anybody that would be tuning in?
Well, I think whenever you're trying to make something accessible and engaging, you want to talk not only to the people that are really technical, but also to the people that deal with it on a daily basis, and they might not be the same person. So, for example, if we were talking about something dealing with 179D or the energy efficient building deduction, now we can dive in and talk about how that affects a tax return and the different intricacies there, but at the same time, we need to talk about how it affects the building owner themselves. What does it mean for them and the cash in their pocket? So there's 2 elements of talking on a technical level. There's the element that makes it interesting to the CPA that deals with it all the time, but there's also the aspect of it that makes it interesting for the building owner that it actually affects how they go out and put money in their own pocket.
So both the CPA and kind of the end user client.
Correct. And understanding how these things change over time. And so a end user client might have done a study on something 5 years ago. Well, how is that different today? How is that ever-changing landscape of tax legislation updating on a daily basis? And that's going to be important for both aspects of it. But in order to keep it interesting, we really want to dive into the changes that we see changing quite rapidly right now with the IRA. A lot of these things changed. And when we saw that Inflation Reduction came out, it changed 179D. It changed how studies work on energy efficient property and solar panels, et cetera. We see changes on 174 as it relates to the R&D tax credit. These things are changing almost on a weekly basis, it seems like nowadays. So we want to keep that relevant for people as we move forward.
So Dave, you give presentations for alliance firms and networks, across the country throughout the year. You're published in Accounting Today, Forbes, you name it. What are you excited about sharing your knowledge in a different form on this podcast, Let's Talk Tax?
Well, I think the problem with a lot of these different tax aspects is they get narrowed down to sound bites. And it gets narrowed down to just a sales script. This longer format gives us the ability to dive into the different intricacies of it that allows people to understand how it affects them. I remember years ago when I was sitting at a training when I was just in my early stages of my career, and the instructor for the training stood up there and said, I don't want anybody talking about what ifs. I don't want what if questions. But what ifs are how we learn. So a longer format like this gives us an ability to dive into what ifs and dive into different scenarios, which is how people can then relate these different tax concepts to themselves and their businesses.
It's a great point. So we want this to be engaging, right, and impactful for the listeners. So making sure everyone that has a question or an idea for a show, please engage with us on social media. We have YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever you name it. Our handle's at Let's Talk Tax Podcast. You can find Dave. He's on LinkedIn. He's on our website. Shoot him a question. Send us any of your thoughts. We've built this podcast for the platform, as Dave mentioned, to talk about these complicated issues and break them down so people can understand. So we value and appreciate your input. So please keep it up. we have a lot of exciting episodes planned for this season. You yourself, Dave, how do you stay updated on legislative developments and trends?
Well, it's not something they teach you in engineering school. It is something that over time I've had to develop. And a lot of it's just reading. And it's like anything, it's almost a muscle you have to exercise. And so as you see updates coming out, you have to be interested in it. It's the old concept of when you're interested in something, you learn more about it, you dig deeper in it, you figure it out. Now, I will tell you, there are times when something comes out, I still need to do research to figure out what it means. So we all talk in tax, we talk in numbers and letters. So you'll hear me say 179D or Section 48 or 1245. Well, there's still time when legislation comes out. I don't know what the numbers and letters in the legislation means, and I still have to dig in. And it's like any type of exercise. You have to dig in and keep trying and building that up over time. But it is interesting to me, and it's interesting to see how it affects the different clients we have. And the more we see that, the more we can really dig into those new topics when they come out.
I will say anytime something's for a vote or being discussed, you usually have it up on your computer. If you walk by your office, you can see the live stream of the feed.
I do spend way too much time on thehill.com, and I probably watch more C-SPAN than any other middle-aged man, and that's saying a lot.
Okay, so we've covered everything from legislative updates, what you're excited about the podcast. What gets you jazzed about the tax industry? What's your favorite part?
Honestly, tax is not that exciting on its own. But when you can see how it impacts people, when you can see how it impacts businesses, that changes things. So if I just sit here and say, hey, there's depreciation rules that affect how you can manipulate buildings, quite frankly, that's boring. But if you say, if you make an investment in your business, here's how we can utilize it to save you money on your taxes that then you can reinvest and you can use to hire people, grow the business. That's where it gets exciting. The actual reading the tax code, that's boring. It's not that exciting, but it's how it affects people going down and looking at their different businesses that really makes it interesting.
And this is what we have planned for the season. Every episode, we're going to feature a different client story, whether it's industry, geographical region, whatever, but it's more applicable. You're going to take the legislative update or that piece of tax code, break it down and make it so anyone can understand it who's tuning in and know and advise their clients on what to do with it.
Exactly. I think it provides that personal touch a little bit where you can actually see how it affects you on a day-to-day basis.
As we continue through this season, what are you most excited to talk about on the podcast?
I'm excited to watch some of the legislation that's sitting actually right now in the Congress and in the Senate and seeing how it works its way through and how that will affect businesses as we're sitting right now in the middle of the 2023 filing season, not knowing where we stand on certain things like 174 and bonus depreciation, and just talking to people on the podcast about how that will affect them.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I'll certainly be tuning in to hear your insights on that. Well, thank you for giving us a brief glimpse into Dave McGuire and sharing your excitement for the podcast this season and what makes you you.
Well, I appreciate it, and I look forward to talking to people more.